the San Carlos City Council Redevelopment Agency of October 24th, 2005. And I have asked two Boy Scouts from San Carlos Troop 321, Jordan Ginsberg and James Smith, to please come forward and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Can you please put your hands over your heart? I pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, gentlemen. Our next item is changes to the order of the agenda. Staff, do you have any changes?
We have no changes.
No changes. Council members? Hearing none, we'll move on to item 3, council communications and announcements. Don?
Yes, I have been in communication with PG&E with regard to the completion of the undergrounding of utilities on Industrial Road. There are, unfortunately, still a few of the property owners who haven't made their connections yet, electrical connections. However, PG&E is going to work to get the lines down and all the poles down fairly soon. They supposedly were to have started on last Sunday. They are also particularly mindful of the holiday season for those people who are in the retail business in any way, shape, or form, and they're going to go out of their way to try to make this process as painless as possible. So just an ongoing report. It is coming along, and soon, and before you know it, there will be no more telephone poles and no more wires on Industrial Road.
Thank you. Mike, none? Okay, Tom?
I just report that I had the opportunity to represent the council and the city at the Laurel Street Park on Friday night for the first annual Diwali celebration. This is a festival of lights within the Indian culture. It was very interesting. We had a number of visitors from outside the community and a number from inside. A couple of hours of dance and music, and it was great to host this event. So hopefully we'll be able to do it again a year from now. Thank you.
And I can testify, I walked by there on my way to dinner. Looked like you all were having quite a fun time.
We had a good time.
Yeah, good. I want to send regrets from our mayor, Inga Doherty, Inga Teagle Doherty, and she had some pressing business that meant that she couldn't be here tonight, and she sends her apologies. I wanted to announce that we did meet earlier at 6:15 this evening for interviews to appoint citizens to our advisory commissions, and we have appointed Gail McPartland to the Traffic and Transportation Commission, and we have appointed Julie Becker and Kim Alchemisti to the Senior Citizens Advisory Board. And that's all the communications I have. Moving on to item number 4, staff, if you have any reports to council.
The one report in the agenda packet relates to the calendar for the review and consideration of fire services. We're happy to answer any questions that the council might have.
Council members, any questions? None? Tom?
No.
None? Okay. Fair enough. We'll move on from there. The next item is public comment. This is a time for the public to make comment to the council and to city staff for items that are not on the posted agenda. And currently I have one speaker slip for that from Pat Bell. Pat?
I actually have comments on 2 matters, but I think I can do each one in less than a minute. More than a month ago, I called Christy Tinney, who is our emergency or disaster coordinator for San Carlos, I guess, and asked her about flooding in my area. Would that be were we at high risk for flooding. And she said she was going to be out of the office for a week, and she would send me the maps, flood maps, when she got back. And I haven't heard from her. 4 weeks ago tonight, Chief Rothaus and I both spoke about emergency preparedness. I gave him my phone number that night. He said he'd call me. I haven't heard from him. So, you know, all the candidates are hearing about the non-responsiveness of the city, and this is just another example, I think, of the frustration of citizens who are trying to get information from the city. And the other thing that concerns me is that people assume because I live in what is called Loreola, that the Loreola Neighborhood Association represents me, which is not true. The people who are involved in Loreola Neighborhood Association are a small group of very conservative people who, by vast majority, live on Holly or south of Holly. I live north of Holly. And unlike some of you on the west side, I know my neighbors, and I don't know anyone who agrees with the neighborhood association and their slate. Aside from that little core group, there's one guy who lives north of Holly who's on their board, but I don't know anyone who supports their slate, which they haven't endorsed, but they have yard signs on their two streets, McHugh and Holly. And when they speak to council members, I think sometimes council assumes that they speak for North Loreola as well, and I don't think that's true. It certainly is not true where I live. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I would just say, staff members, I see you taking notes about those items. Thank you. Do we have any other members from the public who wish to speak on items that are not on the posted agenda? We still have a little bit of time left. We have. Okay. This is regarding something that's not on the posted agenda?
It's about the firefighters proposal.
No, not specifically. We don't. So, yeah, you may. Go ahead. Please state your name and city of residence.
My name's Margaret Desmond, and I live on Springfield in San Carlos. And I have two things that regarding the firefighters' proposal. I think, number one, that every consideration should be given to the firefighters. They're the people that do the work for us. They're the people that work in our surrounding communities. And I do trust them. And I think that they have a lot to tell us that maybe we don't know about because we're not working there on a daily basis. And we might just learn to work it out, so to speak, if there are items on their proposal that we don't agree with or you don't agree with. Sit down and talk about it. And the second thing is I do not think that we should even consider the state for the main reason. The concern that I have is that it sounds like, from my limited understanding, that you're going to get a two-tier system. You're going to have firefighters that are making certain salary now, and then they'll be hired at a lower salary because of the state's salary base. And when I was sitting here the other night and they were sitting in front of me, I saw a lot of people that didn't have any gray hairs at all. And they're very young, and they're going to be with us if we're fortunate for a long time. And it doesn't seem like that's going to add to the morale of the fire department if you have people like that. And I think we've all heard since we were children that firefighters work together, live together, play together, because I think the bottom line probably is that they know they can depend upon each other to save them if they're in a fire and their life is in danger. And if you start building that two-tier, I think you're destroying the morale of a fire department. So I do not support that at all. Thank you.
Thank you, Margaret. We have one more speaker, John Hoffman.
My name is John Huffman. I live at 909 Crestview Drive, San Carlos. Two things not on the agenda. After 2 years of delay, I would love to see the council have an up or down vote on the library, studying the feasibility of the library drop boxes. Great convenience, minimal cost, but the decision of the council. The second thing is that some time ago I made the offer to the council, if elected, to work for $1 a year. I received no response from the council whatsoever in any form, and I would appreciate it if the council would make response.
Thank you. And because John is asking for a response, I would just remind folks that during public comment, we're not permitted to respond back at this time. That would close our item of public comment. For items not on the agenda, we'll move on to item 6, which is approval of the consent calendar. Consent calendar is considered to be items that are routine, and unless someone wants to discuss something separately and pull it off the consent calendar, it would be passed with one motion for all items. Do I hear a motion?
Move to approve consent calendar, items A.
We need to ask if there's anyone that should be removed first.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Is there anybody that would like to pull an item off the consent calendar for further deliberation?
Yeah.
Staff? No? Anybody from the public? Seeing none, I would now entertain a motion.
Move to approve the consent calendar, items A through D.
Second?
It's been motioned and seconded. Christine, the roll call?
Councilmember Davids?
Yes.
Councilmember King?
Yes.
Councilmember Eaton?
Yes.
Councilmember Grocott?
Yes.
Mayor Teagle Doherty is absent.
Okay, item 7 is a public hearing, and item A is consideration of abandoning an 8 1/2 foot wide strip on the northerly side of the 1900, the 2000, and the 2100 blocks of Howard Avenue between Cedar Street and Cordilleras Avenue. Parvis?
Mr. Vice Mayor, members of the council, I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have. This is pretty straightforward. The abandonment is at request of the homeowner.
Council, any questions?
No.
Anybody from the public that would like to speak on this item? Seeing none, I
Move to
would,
close the public hearing?
Second?
okay. It's been moved and seconded. Christine?
Move to introduce resolution 2005-86.
86.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Councilmember King?
Yes.
Councilmember Eaton?
Yes.
Councilmember Davids?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Grocott?
Yes. Okay, moving on to item B, consideration of abandoning a 5-foot wide strip along the southeasterly side of the 900 block of Montgomery Street between Bayport Boulevard and Industrial Road.
Same again, the routine requested by a property owner, and we have no use for the right-of-way.
Okay, this is a public hearing on this item. Is there anybody from the public who would like to speak on this item? I see one gentleman in the back.
I have maps and everything of what I would have to.
Could you,
make
excuse me, would you please state your name?
My name is
and-
Richard Hars, 961 Montgomery, owner.
Okay,
And I have, if there's any problems, I have plans that I brought with me in case you need to have a better understanding of the right-of-way abandonment. I'll let that go at that.
okay. Any council members like to see those maps? No? Okay. Pretty routine, but I just wanted to ask. Anybody else from the public that would like to speak on this?
Move to
Seeing
close the
none,
public
I
hearing?
would, okay, go ahead.
Second?
It's been moved and seconded to close the public hearing. Christine?
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Move to introduce resolution 2005-87.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded.
Councilmember King?
Yes.
Councilmember Davids?
Yes.
Councilmember Eaton?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Grocott?
Yes. Okay, next item is probably the one that most folks are here for. Item 7C, which is a public hearing on the draft-focused environmental impact prepared for purposes of annexing 2.62 acres of unincorporated San Mateo County land located on Winding Way to the city of San Carlos and subsequent development of this land for single-family residential use. The subject parcels are located along Winding Way in the Devonshire Canyon area, adjacent to the southwestern limits of San Carlos. We will first have a presentation by staff at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Grocott, members of the City Council, and members of the community. It's been about a year and a half since your consideration of this project, so I thought I'd start with a brief background on the project. First of all, the Council, as you will recall, approved the pre-zoning for the Winding Way project on March 8th of 2004. These approvals followed the City Council's adoption of what we call a mitigated negative declaration, which is essentially an environmental analysis of the project, declaring that there were potentially significant environmental impacts associated with the development, but that those could be mitigated to a level of insignificance. As a side note, the Local Area Formation Commission, LAFCA, which is a county commission, has not yet acted upon this application to annex the site. They're the ones that have the governing authority to annex. The Council has only pre-zoned the property. Continuing background then, on April 9th of 2004, the Devonshire Canyon Open Space Alliance filed a lawsuit against the city and the applicants, the developers, challenging the city's approval of the project based on environmental and general plan concerns. While the lawsuit was pending, staff was made aware of new information regarding the presence of certain threatened or species of concern on the project site, specifically the arcuate bush mallow and also the dusky-footed wood rat. The mitigated negative declaration had identified the potential existence of and mitigations for the dusky-footed wood rat, but did not address the arcuate bush mallow. The city and the Devonshire Canyon Open Space Alliance and the applicants settled the litigation, and the settlement preserved the pre-zoning approval that the Council had adopted and included the following changes to the project. First, that the extended portion of Winding Way would be narrowed to approximately 18 feet in width. Second, that an access gate preventing through traffic would be installed at one end of the extension of Winding Way, and that would allow continued public pedestrian access, or I should say public pedestrian access. Third, that the applicants would include a crushed gravel pedestrian path along the extension of Winding Way, which would not have interference with the riparian area or cut into the hillside. And finally, that San Carlos would prepare a focused environmental impact report focusing on biological impacts and specifically the wood rat, the bush mallow, and other sensitive or endangered species. In terms of background on the focused environmental impact report, the city did distribute what we call a notice of preparation on this document, or in advance of this document preparation, on June 10th of 2005. Comment letters in response to the notice of preparation were received from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and also from the California Native Plant Society. Staff incorporated those comments into the draft document, which you have before you, and proceeded to produce the draft focused environmental impact report. The focused environmental impact report, the draft, was produced for public review beginning on July 22nd of 2005. And although not currently required by CEQA, the California Environmental Quality Act, the public review period has been extended twice to accommodate public interest in web postings and also to allow additional opportunities to comment on the draft focused environmental impact report up to the date of the first public hearing, which is this public hearing on the focused environmental impact report. Finally, although CEQA does require only a 45-day public review period, the city has provided a 95-day public review period on this draft document. This brings us to this evening, and the purpose of our hearing tonight is primarily to receive public comment on the draft-focused environmental impact report. This hearing is really an information gathering session for the City Council, and responses to comments and questions will be presented during presentation of the final focused environmental impact report and any decision-making that goes along with that, such as the tax exchange resolution. The future request of the applicant will be to certify a final focused environmental impact report, which will include the draft and responses to comments, and then also consider a tax exchange resolution, which would exchange the tax agreement from the county to the city. Again, since it has been a year and a half since your consideration of the project, I'll give you a brief project description and then turn it over to our environmental consultant, who will give you highlights of the draft focused environmental impact report, so that will help in the public comment this evening. The properties are located, obviously, in the unincorporated area of San Mateo County within the San Carlos Sphere of Influence, which is an area that has been planned for annexation into San Carlos specifically for many years. The applicant is proposing to construct 5 new homes on 5 separately owned properties, which are located on Winding Way off of Chesham Avenue, and the properties total approximately 2.5 acres. The properties are undeveloped, currently range in size from about 16,000 square feet to 34,000 square feet in size. And just to orient you to where this is, the hatched marks indicate where 4 of the homes are proposed, and then down below at the southern end of the property, that would be an area for 1 more of the homes, so totaling 5 homes. The environmental impact report analyzes 2 options, not because those are before you specifically tonight or even before the city staff, but in order to provide a comprehensive and thorough environmental analyses. The first option under consideration within the EIR proposes 3 of the 5 homes to be constructed in an uphill style, and there would be driveway access facilitated by bridges connecting the western portion of Winding Way. So again, access would be from bridge driveways over the creek. And through this rendering, you can see the 3 homes that would be constructed in this uphill style, which would be at along the westerly portion of Winding Way. The 4th home and 5th homes remain stationary in both options and would be located further away from the creek. Option 2 considers 3 of the 5 homes to be constructed in a downhill style, located away from the creek, and access then would be from the eastern portion of Winding Way. And this rendering here, these are conceptual footprints, not specific development proposals, but they outline the feasibility and the appropriate parameters for environmental analyses by developing these conceptual footprints. So these residences, as you can see, are further away from the creek and would access from the eastern portion of Winding Way. Again, the 4th and 5th residence would remain the same in both options. Along with the proposal for the new homes would be off-site improvements, including, as indicated by the red dotted areas, improvement of Winding Way all the way from Chesham to the improved portion of Winding Way at this point, so surrounding the property completely as well as several other properties. And with that, I'm going to have Rod Jung from EIP Associates give you a brief synopsis of the focused environmental impact report and some of the key issues that were assessed, and we'll come back to you for closing comments.
Thank you very much, Liz. Vice Mayor Grocott, members of the Commission, Council, it's a pleasure to be here. As Liz said, the chief impetus for this environmental document was really to look at some of the additional biological information that became known to the community after the mitigated neg deck was already adopted. So what I'm going to do today is kind of highlight some of the information that came forth. It is important to know that right now, as far as the development application before the city, there is nothing that specifically shows the location of housing, building pads, driveways, locations of facilities. So what we have right now is an idea that there are sensitive species on the site, and we know that those resources have a potential to be affected, but we cannot know those specific, precise impacts until such time as there's a development application before the city. As Liz said, 2 different development options were crafted in order to help better understand what those impacts might be, and more importantly, to identify the types of mitigation measures that would help reduce those impacts to less than significant. The important thing to recognize here is that the mitigation measures acknowledge that there's a potentially significant impact to sensitive biological resources on the site. The mitigation measures lay out a process by which further evaluation can be conducted at the site when the development application is submitted in order to determine what those impacts are precisely and more clearly define what the mitigation measures should be. Oops. There I go back. Sorry. Excuse me. Yeah. Okay. The process that's been identified as far as the mitigation measures go specifically calls for pre-construction surveys, so that at the time a development application is before the city, the project sponsor will have to go out and retain a qualified biologist or botanist to go out and specifically look at the footprints of where housing pads are proposed, where driveways are proposed, where landscaping is proposed. And in that fashion, when you do the pre-construction survey, you'll have a better appreciation of the types of impacts and the intensity of those impacts. The measures to address the sensitive species were developed in consultation with the California Department of Fish and Games. And so it's important to understand that with the implementation of these mitigation measures and the process that's been established by the mitigation measure, those impacts would be reduced to a less than significant impact. Now, one of the concerns that's been raised is that if we have a direct impact on some of these species, for example, the Arctic bush mallow or on the dusky-footed wood rat, would there be feasible places to relocate those species off-site? Our preference would be to try to find on-site locations because the habitat is consistent with what they're familiar and accustomed to. Are there places beyond the existing project site? This map helps to illustrate that in green there are a lot of other public and private open spaces where mitigation could occur. So I just wanted to be able to point that out to say that if there isn't locations on site, there are possibilities off site. In terms of traffic, which is one of the other concerns that have been raised, there's acknowledgement that there are going to be trips that are generated by the 5 proposed homes. The full build-out of the Devonshire Canyon area, which includes a much larger area, would not result in traffic that overburdens the roadway capacity. What I want to explain here is that we're not saying that there won't be any traffic. What we have to look at in doing an environmental impact report is whether that additional traffic constitutes a significant impact. And so there will be additional trips generated, there will be additional trips on the road, but those aren't going to be overburdening the capacity of the roadway. There was some concern about the design of Winding Way and whether it would create hazardous conditions. As Liz has already described, the design of that facility is going to be in accordance with city standards, the rural development standards, and those standards have been reviewed by the South County Fire Authority to ensure that there's adequate emergency access. Finally, there's been some questions raised about the proposed gate, which came up during the settlement agreement, and whether that would inhibit emergency access and whether that would discourage through traffic. Well, the answer is yes, it would discourage through traffic. That was partially the intent of putting in that gate. I'd like to point out that that's not really any different than what the current conditions are. The current conditions are that you have an unpaved road so that through traffic isn't possible. The addition of the gate, the installation of that gate, isn't really going to change the existing conditions. As I mentioned earlier, the implementation of the gate and also the design of the roadway raised some concerns about whether or not there might be some impediment to emergency response and whether or not firefighting equipment would be able to access the property. Again, this is where the South County Fire Authority has taken a look at the proposed improvements and has determined that it would be safe, that emergency vehicles could access the properties, and there would not be any endangerment or impediment to the properties. Finally, one of the other issues that came up repeatedly during the course of the earlier preparation of the environmental document, the mitigated neg deck, was how much additional growth might occur in addition to the 5 homes that are proposed at this location. And in order to get a better sense of what the development potential might be in the vicinity, the city took prepared a study for the Devonshire Canyon area and began to identify what the development potential might be in this area. The area that's shown, well, not very clearly here, but this area that's shown in yellow represents about 147 acres that are within the city of San Carlos. The area that's in green constitutes about 118 acres, and that's land that's either in public or private open space. And finally, there's another 107 acres that fall within the San Mateo County and have residential zoning. When the city specifically looked at all these different areas and all the parcels within it, there was an estimate made that if the land were to remain in the county, a maximum number of 57 dwelling units could be developed. And that's assuming that the septic systems could be built and could be accommodated and it could accommodate that amount of development. Some of the questions that have come up during the course of the public review has been to question the number of 57 units and whether that's an accurate representation. The way this environmental document was prepared was to look at it from a very conservative perspective and to assume that all of that development potential could occur. The actual number that could develop was probably likely to be smaller, simply because of the topography and simply because of the need to accommodate septic systems. Whether it's larger, whether it's smaller, we've used 57 units to anticipate what the cumulative development might be. When you take a look at the 57 units, which includes the 5 on the project site, we're determining that this would not result in any additional environmental impacts. It would not result in any significant impacts in terms of traffic, in terms of land use, in terms of visual, in terms of hydrology, et cetera. And this graphic finally kind of portrays, yet again, the amount of land that's available for development and the areas that were considered by city staff in developing the cumulative scenario. So with that, I'm going to turn it back to Liz.
Okay, just brief closing comments. The hearing this evening is dedicated, again, to receiving public comment on the draft focused environmental impact report. It's an information gathering session. These are items that I've listed before, but responses to comments and questions will be presented to you at a future date when you're considering the certification, adequacy, and thoroughness of the final environmental impact report. And finally, council discussion and deliberation on the project should be deferred until those decision-making items are before you. So we would recommend that you would receive public commentary at this point. Then also we would welcome any comments or questions from the City Council themselves, so we can make sure again that the EIR is thorough and adequate for your consideration at your next decision-making hearing.
Okay, so at this point we will open up the meeting to comment from the public. I have currently, I think I counted about 8 speaker cards. Sorry, start over again. My mic was not on. I apologize. At this moment, we'll open up the meeting to the public comment, and I had 8 speaker cards. I think now I have about 16 speaker cards, just giving it a quick count. Before we get started on that, I just would like to ask folks to try and keep their comments brief, and also we're not taking a tally of for and against up here. We're trying to gather information. So if somebody makes a comment and it covers a topic that you have already, that perhaps you had down, stole your thunder, I think is what people sometimes say. You might either refrain from speaking, or if you just want to come up and say something very brief, that would be fine. But we don't, of course, want to be here any longer than is necessary. Not that we don't want to hear the comments from the public, but we just don't want to retread material over and over and over again. So with that, I'm going to open it up to the public comment, and we are going to try and keep a watch on the time, not to cut people short or anything like that. We'll let you speak and finish your comments, but we will, because there are a lot of comments here, and I imagine some people may get up during the meeting and decide that they have something to say. We're just going to keep a close eye on the time, and I just want to let you know that ahead of time. Thank you. First speaker card I have is from Marie Monahan, and following her will be Heidi Sorenka.
Good evening. My name is Marie Monahan. I live at 164 Chesham Avenue. Chesham Avenue, my house is in the hairpin turn that will be facing the proposed homes. I've lived there since 1985 with my family. I would like to have the council vote to have our last green belt in San Carlos preserved, and I'd like you to consider the EIR proposal. At previous meetings, we've learned that the City Council would wanted to create a green space, and I want to remind you that you have one, and I'd like you to look at it. Chesham Avenue was in this proposal mentioned as a little bleep towards the end, but it's really where all the cars will come in and out of. The streets that will be created to come out onto Chesham Avenue will be 20 to 22 feet wide. Chesham Avenue is 14 feet or less. There are ditches on the side of the roads that It's not actually 14 feet. And so what I would like you to look at is the safety issue. From 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. and even later in the summer, you will see families walking Chesham to Windsor to Devonshire. So mom, dad, the kids, the dogs. And right now, with reduced traffic flow, you can hear a car coming and you can get out of the way. But there are no sidewalks to jump onto for these kids as cars fly down the streets. And if we increase the traffic, it becomes more dangerous. And so with everything that's been really looked at, and as people laugh about saving wood rats, I'd like you to think about saving children and to consider the safety of having, again, a 22-foot road feed out into a 14-foot road. Now, what makes sense to me is to keep the gate on Chesham like you're thinking about with Winding Way, and to have these people leave their home onto King's Court, which is a city street, which is wide, onto Devonshire, a city street, which is wide. You're taking away our greenbelt, you're making it city, so this way, if you could have everything annexed onto Devonshire, then the city would share the burden that we will share in losing this greenbelt. So for safety, I hope you'd consider that. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Heidi, and I'm going to butcher your name, Heidi, if you'll forgive me ahead of time, Srenka. And after her is Diane Ray.
Good evening, Vice Mayor, council members, staff, and community members. My name is Heidi Skrenta. I live at 160 Winding Way in San Carlos, and I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. I'd like to use this time to point out that the draft-focused EIR, the mitigated negative declaration, and other staff reports and documents for the Winding Way proposal contain a number of inaccuracies and omissions regarding the project and site characterization. These include, but are not limited to, the incomplete definition of the riparian corridor, inaccurate characterization of the average cross slopes of the lots, lack of discussion of the impact of road improvements between the Chesham Gate and the project site, and also a failure to mention a presence of a seismic shear zone bordering the southeast side of the project site. And some of these have actually been submitted to you in detail by Drew Shell, I believe. But one of the most striking inconsistencies when considering the environmental impact of this development is the description of the project site as substantially developed, although I just noticed as another inconsistency in the presentation tonight that they've called it undeveloped. It keeps flipping around depending on what is being talked about. I have a map here. I'm sorry I don't have an overhead, and I can make copies and give it to you, but it shows the project site, and it shows that it's actually surrounded by area that's either zoned city open space or areas in the county or the city that, although not zoned open space, are in fact vacant right now. So essentially, it is essentially open space with regard to the animals and vegetation that's growing there. The closest structure on this map is about 125 feet to the north, to the east 250 feet, to the west 375 feet, and to the south it's over 800 feet to any house or structure.
Heidi, if you could wrap up your comments, please.
Okay, so it is a significantly undeveloped area, and it would have a significant effect to develop it. I would just like to say that CEQA laws were created to protect our environment, our natural resources, and our quality of life. You as council members may or may not feel that it is your responsibility to be environmental stewards. However, as elected officials, it is your responsibility to listen to the residents of San Carlos and try to act in their best interests. If you choose to forge ahead with this project against stated city policies, over the concerns of many residents, and destroying the habitat of at least one sensitive plant and animal species, we would at least like to know what the overriding public benefit will be from this development. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Next is Diane Ray, and following her is Drew Shell.
Hi, my name is Diane Ray. I live at 123 Winding Way. I thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak tonight. Over the last few years, the City Council has established some admirable goals. It has established a goal of preserving and increasing open space. You've approved the Sustainable Community document that embraces that goal as Park and Rec to explore open spaces, even considering knocking down structures to create them. The Council has established a goal of minimizing traffic congestion, and it passed a document with a goal of building housing near the transit corridor. You've worked really hard to try to get a SCOOP program going to minimize traffic congestion because it's a major concern for residents. And the Council has established a goal of preserving creeks and waterways. And you've appointed a natural resource task force to pursue that goal. And discussed an ordinance to have property owners tear down structures in the riparian corridor upon the sale of property. So these three goals, increasing open space, preserving open space, minimizing traffic congestion, and preserving creeks and waterways, are really admirable, and they're in the citizens' interest. What I have difficulty understanding is why the city is pursuing a project, this annexation, which violates all three of the goals: the preservation or increasing of open space, the minimizing of traffic congestion, and the preservation of the riparian corridor. This would definitely increase traffic congestion, lead to further development. It will destroy open space, and the proposal even includes building in the riparian corridor, the same structures that you're proposing to have torn down on the sale of property. It's inconsistent with every city goal, and my question is the same as Heidi's. Where is the public benefit?
Diane, if you can...
Could I just... I'll wrap up. In addition, it violates a number of city policies. City policies forbid developing in the riparian corridor, and yet this annexation shows one option, building in the riparian corridor, and fails to acknowledge two branches of the creek, which would mean the other option would be building in the riparian corridor. Even EIP states that the footprint of the southernmost house is in the riparian corridor, and it also involves, the annexation policies clearly state that the construction of streets meeting city or rural standards are required, both to and through the annex piece. And that just isn't happening here. I mean, the requirements have been twisted into a pretzel to make it seem like it is, but it really violates the city policies as well as CEQA. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next is Drew Michelle, and followed by Kay Bonney. I'm going to state here, don't feel like you're rude if you walk up and just start talking. I know you're thankful to be here, and I know folks have a lot to say, so in the interest of time, if you could just launch into state your name and your city of residence, and then just launch into your material, please.
Good evening. My name is Drew Shell. I'm a San Carlos resident. At the beginning of tonight's meeting, I turned in 2 additional reports, both from myself and from CMPS. These discuss additional information and issues beyond what was covered in my previous reports submitted in September. Speaking on behalf of CMPS, I'll simply state that in light of the significant botanical issues associated with this project, the Santa Clara Valley chapter has voted to officially oppose both the Focused Environmental Impact Report and the associated annexation and development. We strongly encourage the city to instead prepare a full, accurate, and complete EIR for the project before taking any further action on the matter. Speaking on behalf of myself, I'll reiterate an earlier offer to council members. This is clearly a very complex matter and requires careful study to fully understand the issues involved. With that in mind, I'm available to you to discuss this matter and explain the various issues in detail. To date, only 2 council members have taken me up on this offer. I encourage the others to do so as well before taking any further action on this matter. In the limited time I have left, I'll point out just a couple of the many serious deficiencies in the DFEIR. The current document only mentions the presence of 8 dusky-footed wood rat nests at the project site, but in recent site visits, I personally have observed over 30 additional nests at the project site. Clearly, the city has not adequately surveyed for this rare animal as required by CEQA. Furthermore, I have official comments from the Department of Fish and Game scientist responsible for San Mateo County, stating that DFG does not support the proposed translocation mitigations for either of the 2 rare species at the site. This is entirely counter to the summary that you received earlier this evening. The project would in fact have significant impacts on these species, yet the city has provided no reasons as to why these or a variety of other significant impacts should be ignored for the sake of this project. I urge you to weigh this and all other issues carefully before taking any further action. And just one last item in response to the city staff report you received earlier. The comment that development of this site has been anticipated for many years is not entirely true. In fact, when the Hyde Park development was put in, the city specifically required that the emergency access road, Winding Way, was acquired specifically for emergency access to Hyde Park. The city specifically required that that road not be paved. 2 of the reasons given for that were preservation of the environment and discouragement of further development. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Next is Kay Bonney, followed by Julie Scher.
Well, as you said, I'm Kay Bonney. I reside at 393 Winding Way. And I just want to say among the reasons that San Carlos is such a pleasant place to live are the many parks, trees, and places to walk. This is a town that you can walk in. You can stroll around downtown, rest on a sidewalk bench or in a cafe. You can stroll the neighborhoods. My son, who grew up here, has always walked to school from grade school through high school. But the wonderful thing about San Carlos is not only that you can stroll through pretty, well-cared-for neighborhoods, you can walk in natural places, too. Places where nature holds sway. We are lucky that our son and his friends had undeveloped open space near our house to explore, following the deer trails and building forts and rope swings. Both my husband and I grew up in neighborhoods with open space where we remember spending many happy, formless hours. And I hope that our grandchildren will be able to do the same. I think all kids need that, and not just our kids. We all need places that are not fenced or paved or even beautifully manicured. San Carlos still has those natural places. Let's keep some open space, or there still has some natural places, so let's not fill them all up with houses. Let's keep some open space for all of us.
Thank you very much. Julie Scher, followed by Gwen Bowers.
Hi, I'm Julie Scheer, and I live at 153 Palm Avenue. So I'm here actually to represent a group of people who were not able to come. Over the last few months, I've had the opportunity to talk to a number of people in San Carlos about this issue. And much to my concern, almost none of them had heard about it. I have probably talked to over 100 people. I have actually submitted petitions to you with many of their signatures opposing this. And I'm here to actually submit some more petitions with 40 more signatures. I spent the last few days talking to people, and once again, of the 40 signatures, none of them had heard about this proposal before I talked to them. These are not people who actually live in the Devonshire Canyon area, but they're people who live near it. I live on Palm Avenue. These people live in Arundel, Hillcrest, Highland, Northam. The viewshed that you are considering developing is part of their current property value and part of why they live on the hill that we live in. Many of them were very concerned about the fact that not only was there potential development, but that may open the development area for many more houses, more than the 5. And today we actually heard that the potential development in this area is 29 lots per the requirements of the city. I can tell you now that the people I talked to would be very disappointed to hear that the city is considering putting in 29 lots in that canyon. They also are very concerned that they haven't heard about this project. They believe the city is responsible for outreach when they are doing this type of development and considerations and feel that the city has not met its obligations. And finally, people are concerned about the fact that the city is not maintaining its policies and that they are considering additional development in hillsides. This is actually an area where people live on hillsides. They understand the concerns of mudslides and threats and things like that. And they believe that the city should do its due diligence before it accepts a proposal like this. So I'm here to submit the petition and with these people's names, and I hope you will consider this grave matter. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Gwen Bowers, followed by Stephen with no last name here.
Thank you. My name's Gwen Bowers. I live at 1529 San Carlos Avenue, and I'm a local educator and writer. And in fact, one of my students led us in the pledge this evening. And I'm here to speak on behalf of the kids. We hear a lot about open space, and this is a particularly unusual open space and a great resource for teachers to use. And there are a handful of schools right in the community here, and teachers could bring their kids to find out more about this unusual natural resource we have. So I'd like you to consider the kids and the future, and thank you very much.
Thank you. I think this is Steve Schrey, because it's the only Steve I have, and I know you wanted to speak. Followed by Len Matterman.
Good evening. My name is Steve Schrey. I'm the spokesperson for the Devonshire Canyon Open Space Alliance. Vice Mayor Grocott, City Council members Eaton, King, and Davids, pleasure to see you again. I would like to, first of all, thank everyone here who came out this evening once again to voice your concerns and your opposition to the proposed development in Winding Way. Those of you who've come out in support of the Devonshire Canyon Open Space Alliance, if you just kind of let us know by either raising your green sheet of paper or standing up if you don't have one, and just so everybody gets a sense of how many folks have come out for the Devonshire Canyon. Appreciate that. Thank you. So one of the things I'd like to point out is over the years that we've been discussing this, opposition to the development has expanded, including formal opposition by the Sierra Club, the California Native Plant Society, Friends of Cordilleras Creek, and numerous residents and folks in neighborhoods outside of the Devonshire Canyon area. This is clearly a very important issue to a broad group of both San Carlos residents and broader groups. We've made major progress to date in our opposition and our discussions around the Devonshire Canyon development and the Winding Way project. Just to point out, the original plan, absent an environmental impact report or any environmental consideration, had proposed burying the creek with a pipe and running drainage underground and building homes right over the creek. It was only through our efforts of highlighting the need for thorough environmental impact that there was even a recognition of a creek on the site and an assessment of the need to preserve a riparian corridor. I appreciate that progress to date, as does the whole group. I would like to point out that this is a small step along the way to a full EIR. We settled with the city. We actually sued the city after agreeing to annex for a full EIR. We settled with the city to do a DFEIR, understanding that in that settlement it would open up the process for the city to be compliant and fully in accordance with the laws and requirements of CEQA, the California Environmental Quality Act. And that, folks, does require a full and comprehensive environmental impact report. Our settlement in no way limits the obligations of the city to perform a full environmental impact report. Some of the things that are in the DFEIR, in the draft, defer many issues that are just not allowed in CEQA. Specific definition of the riparian corridor, unambiguous identification of the top of bank, a specific delineation of where the 25-foot setback from the riparian corridor have not been addressed. The uphill option specifies building in the creek. That is clearly in opposition to what preservation of a riparian corridor that is yet to be defined as. Other plants, the wood rat and the bush mallow, have all issues that have been deferred under CEQA are required to be included. In summary, in conclusion, I request that you reject the DFEIR, demand a full environmental impact report as required by the laws of CEQA, and uphold the requirements and obligations that you have in your office to comply with the laws of the state of California. And no less important, listen to the concerns and the interests of the citizens of San Carlos, who have extensively voiced our opinions about not proceeding with this project. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Len Matterman, followed by Barb Patterson.
It's great to see so many people turning out tonight on behalf of all of our quality of life. As the previous speaker just mentioned, I'm a resident of the White Oaks neighborhood. My name is Len Matterman, and as this previous speaker just mentioned, I'm from an area that's not next to Devonshire Canyon, and I'm interested in it because Devonshire Canyon, to me and to a lot of people, obviously, is important to San Carlos's quality of life. Over 18 months ago, I first met with residents of the canyon to learn about this project. As I watched the city pay to settle a lawsuit, also just mentioned, brought by the residents, I also grew concerned that this project would drain our city budget, which now, as you know, has a $2 million deficit. This proposed development on land that is now not even in San Carlos has already cost the city. In the future, this project will place new burdens on us taxpayers through needed fire protection, flood recovery, utilities, and infrastructure costs. When considering new development, it is important to determine if a project provides economic benefit, if it addresses a housing need, enhances our city environment, and is supported by neighbors. Those are 4 important criteria. If a project does none of these things, then I would question its value. In the presentations tonight, we did not hear that this project does any of these things to improve the city. We did not hear that it provides economic benefit to the city. We did not hear that it addresses a housing need. We did not hear that it enhances our city environment. And we certainly did not hear it is supported by residents of the community. Many speaking tonight question the wisdom of constructing large homes on a steep hillside with difficult fire access. They also question whether housing 5 families, or perhaps more as indicated tonight, provides more community-wide benefit than preserving one of our last remaining open spaces. I think those are good questions that we all should think about. I also question the planning process that has obviously shut out so many residents that they felt compelled to join together and sue the city to have their voices heard. 2 weeks ago, with great fanfare and expense, the City Council held a workshop to hear the hopes and concerns of San Carlos residents with the goal of building community. In 15 days, San Carlos residents will really have a chance to be heard when they go to the polls to elect a new City Council. After this election, the new council, working with residents, will determine if the Devonshire Canyon project is consistent with the town they want San Carlos to be. We all look forward to participating in that conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next is Barb Patterson, followed by Bob Black, and actually only have 2 more speaker cards after Bob Black.
Good evening again. My name is Barbara Patterson. I live in San Carlos. I think this is about the 9th time I've come before the council with issues relating to creeks. Now, the earlier version of this negative declaration did not even mention the name of a creek in this watershed. They hardly used the term watershed, riparian, creek, or anything. This is referred to as an unnamed waterway. It actually is, this is another attack on the integrity of Pocus Creek and its watershed. This is one of the few remaining intact areas, semi-intact areas, of natural wildlife, plant life, in a pretty much an untouched setting. At this point, there's been no hydrologic report on the effects of placing a paved road about 2,000 feet long, just 40 feet above an active creek. There's been no hydrologic report on the effects of placing 5 homes, 5 driveways, all the hard surfaces associated with that, on the rain runoff into the creek. Over the past year and a half, I've been following this particular project. In fact, seeing this at home on TV kind of got me involved in coming down to City Council. So in talking to you 8 times, I think each time I've presented a new concept. So I think you should be pretty well versed by now, because I really try to hit what's important in understanding. So my feeling is that although we can't all get as involved as I am in understanding creeks and riparian and wetlands, this is truly a riparian wetland, we can become more informed. We cannot be as ignorant. Therefore, what is left is we are indifferent. And I hope that that is not the situation here. This is another attack on the integrity of this poor little creek that has tried to make it through the last 150 years of human occupation, where we did tend to pave and intrude. There have been at least 6 other projects along this creek that cumulatively have an effect on the watershed and on the flooding. Because what is downstream of all of this is our business district and our flat, older downtown districts. That's where all the runoff comes. And I don't think we've seen the worst of the flooding and of the rains that very likely will be coming to our city and to our hemisphere. If we do have global warming, there will be a lot more rain. So these waterways are very essential, and to put 5 huge homes right in the middle of a creek doesn't make any logical sense to me. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. Next is Bob Black, followed by Bruce Modesset. And while Bob's coming up, I'll go ahead and the last person here is Scott Phillip. What happened to Bob? Oh, he's going around back. Okay. There you are.
You didn't warn me. It's Bob Black, 585 Dartmouth. Thank you, Vice Mayor Grocott and members of City Council. I sent a memo to the council via Margaret Netto on September 14th that outlined my objections to the focused EIR. One is that we have not considered an alternative that I think definitely should be considered, and that is as a mitigation, as an alternative project, compare the proposed project to a multi-unit condo at a transportation hub near El Camino and San Carlos Avenue, for instance, and consider what the impacts of one would be compared with the impacts of the other. In the recent past, Council has focused on building up around the transportation corridor. This flies in the face of that, and it also flies in the face of our general plan. And I would like to see a revision to the EIR that compares the alternative project with the proposed project. I also want to give my support to the previous speakers. All of them had very important points, and I think Council should address each and every one of those points very carefully. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bob. Next is Bruce Modesset, followed by Scott Phillip.
Hi, my name is Bruce Modisett. I'm a resident of San Carlos. I live at 120 Winding Way in San Carlos. I'm actually the closest neighbor to the property under consideration tonight, and I stand here in support of the annexation. I think it's a great idea. We're talking about 2.6 acres right there, and it's adjacent to it is 118 acres of open space. So it's a very, very small fraction of the total space there. And just the enhancement to the community and fire safety and emergency vehicle access would be well worth the trade-off. There's plenty of space for the wood rats and everything else to go and live in the area, and it just makes a lot of good sense. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Last speaker, unless I have some other speaker cards shortly, is Scott Phillip. And I see a few people raising their hand. If you would if you would go through the door here and around the back to avoid the cameras and fill out a speaker slip. Thank you.
Hi, good evening, Council. My name is Scott Phillip. I grew up right down the street from the proposed project on Phillip Lane. I presently live in the White Oaks area at 1325 Oakhurst Avenue. I'm actually here with 40 other people. The petition I presented to you last time I was here had 40 signatures of people that live in the Devonshire Canyon, that live very close to the project, that don't wish to be involved in this grassroots opposition, but there are people that live on Winding Way, Windsor, Devonshire. Then there are also people that live in other areas of San Carlos. But anyway, those 40 people support the annexation, along with myself, my wife, my family, and they support the South County Fire in backing this annexation as well. So that said, I support the project, and that's all.
Thank you very much. Scott Phillip? Oh, I'm sorry, that's you. I apologize. Last speaker. If you could state your name and fill out a speaker slip later and give it to us. Thank you.
My name is David Ezekiel. I live at 145 Linton Avenue on the north edge of the canyon. And right now, just to remind you of what's going on in Devonshire Canyon, there are 4 new houses, 3 under construction, 1 about to be built on Linton Avenue. There are 2 new homes, large ones, being built on Dolton Avenue, and there are 2 large new homes being built on Club Drive, all within the Devonshire Canyon area. So what I have to say is there seems to be a sort of piecemeal plan for Devonshire Canyon. And Devonshire Canyon, as it sits now, is home to many kinds of hawks, many kinds of birds, deer, a bobcat, and coyotes. We have a family of coyotes living in the canyon. So bit by bit, like this project, we continue to remove pieces of the canyon. The streets are narrow, and this is a project where we have a wide street feeding into a narrow street. I live in a neighborhood like that. We have a wide street at the end of Linton, now feeding into narrow streets as you get to the back of it. People drive fast. It's gotten dangerous. People who walk their dogs. The quality of life, and we're talking about environmental impact studies, the quality of life for people living there is being degraded by what I think is a lack of an overall plan for the canyon. It seems to be a little piecemeal to me. I know there are a lot of lots now available. I heard the exact number tonight. It doesn't seem to stop there because there were originally across from me lots for 2 homes. There are now 3 homes going in there, and part of that was because of abandonment of a piece of the road that made the lot large enough to put another home on. So I'd love to see a comprehensive plan for Devonshire Canyon because it is unique. It has unique features that make San Carlos good, and I appreciate the chance to speak. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Okay, that concludes all the speakers that wish to speak tonight. So I would take a motion then to close the public hearing if we have no other comments.
Move to close the public hearing.
Second from Tom.
Mr. Vice Mayor, I'd like just a comment from council. A comment was made about the cost of the litigation. Could you clarify the fact that indeed the city has not paid for this item?
Well, that's true, Councilmember King. Like any other development, the city has fee resolutions that require the developer to pay the costs for the development application. In addition, our city code requires any developer to also reimburse the city for any costs of litigation, and that has occurred here. So this is not had a negative cost effect on the city. The city has been reimbursed by the developer.
Okay, we had a motion and a second to close the public hearing, and we need to take a vote on that.
Councilmember King?
Yes.
Councilmember Davids?
Yes.
Councilmember Eaton?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Grocott?
Yes. Okay, next steps in this process, Liz. Do you want to say anything more?
As I mentioned before, our recommendation for you this evening is to receive information from staff and from our EIR consultant, also to receive public comment, which you've done, and we're here to receive any comments that you may have or questions you may have that we can incorporate into the final environmental impact report. So that's essentially it. Once you've given comments to staff, we're done with the hearing. There's no action required this evening. That will be at a future date.
Okay, so council members, do we have any questions?
Yes, I've got one question, at least here. We've heard some differing information from some members of the public tonight, and Liz, it differs from your presentation. Maybe this is a comment for, for Rod Jung from EIP, but specifically, I had written this one down. The staff report says that on October 14th, 2003, that the area was mapped as to the riparian corridor, and I mean different parts of the staff report. It's called a creek, it's called a gully. I've been there, I've seen it, so we can all determine what it is, I suppose. But whereas some of the people who have opposed this potential annexation and development have said that there is no formal definition of any mapping, how do we reconcile that?
We will reconcile that in our response to comments, and we have, unless we want to briefly address that now, but that will be that's been a commonly asked question, so we'll have a master response to that issue. So we
there
have
is an answer to that the council will receive. Okay,
yes.
I just want to make sure.
I have a follow-up question. That the way it's intended to respond to that will define a top of bank, so that we can apply our city ordinance.
Yes, we can do that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mike, you have some question? Yeah.
I'd like to be sure that we have this map that is available to the public. It's on the website, which defines, if we could, in the legend, the numbers that were quoted today, the 372 total acres for the boundary, and that the boundary includes the entire 372 acres includes some already developed property. And then the city's portion of it, the 118 acres of open space, and finally the 107 acres of county space. And the fact that the city's lots defined are approximately 8 in number, and your estimate for the overall county was 57, but under our FAR and slope density would be reduced to 29 without respect to just size of lot. In other words, even with that 29, because of slope of lot, the number could be even less than that. Is that a fair assumption?
It could, but we have
You've taken the most conservative position under CEQA and estimated the full lots just on straight square footage.
Right, but we have done a general slope analysis of those properties to come up with the 29 new residences anticipated.
And that this open space in question is permanently designated through prior discussions. There was some mention tonight about what we used to call Rosa Flora, now Kings Court, and the other large parcel, the Bocce parcel, is permanently open space.
That's correct.
That's part of the 118 open space acres.
That's correct.
Thanks.
Tom.
Now, after the prior approval, we came back and agreed to do a focused EIR. And I'm hearing testimony, I read a lot of testimony in the packet about how we not only need a focused EIR, we need a full EIR. So presumably you'll come back to us and tell us what in fact we do need to solve the legal requirements for moving the project forward, whether we haven't done enough or whether we need to go all the way.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay, and I have my mic just went off, sorry. The questions I have, first I want to follow up to a point that you made, Mike, about the development in the canyon to county standards. And Liz, I had written some notes here that the county, it's argued here that if this annexation takes place, that there will be reduced development potential under our standards as a city. And yet, when I looked at what was said in the report, I want to find what page it's on. I think I can do that here. Actually, it was under, Liz, it was under, I don't know if you know how our packets were put together. It was under tab 2 on page 10, I believe. Let me turn there and find it. Okay, for my other council members, this is, let's see. No, that's not right. I'm sorry. I'm not being able to follow my own notes here, but let me just go ahead and state, and I can get you the information later. There was a county proposal for one lot that was 7.96 acres, and it was going to be divided into 3 sites. That would be an average of 2.65 acres each. And then there was a second county proposal, 9.36 acres divided into 3 sites, and that would be an average of 3.12 acres each. My question is, why are such large parcels on average proposed for the Devonshire Canyon parcels to be developed to the county standards, which allow for a minimum of 5,000 square feet, and has city staff researched this question? Because it certainly relates to the hypothetical development potential in the assessment of the maximum cumulative impact that is stated in the draft focused EIR. Furthering on that point, I took the time to get a hold of the final environmental impact report for the Upper Pulgas Creek Drainage Basin Assessment District. And one of my concerns with the project has to do with not only the potential of the development of 5 houses, but the potential of other homes and the sort of the domino effect that people have talked about for the canyon. Because when I read this report from 1986, it assumed, and in fact the only policy in place at the time was Land Use Policy 11, which assumed lot sizes in this area of 2-acre parcels based on slope density for most of at least this site. And now we're bringing in homes under a different policy that was adopted later. I think I have a document on that too, which is, yeah, the residential annexation policies, resolution number 2001-115, and that's where we introduced policy 36-2B and left in place policy 38. So my concern is if we're now applying policy 36-2B, and if that continues to happen, we could have a lot higher density development in this canyon under city standards than were ever imagined with this EIR report from 1986. And so my concern as a council member is if we proceed forward with these 5 homes and then see other development at that density applying 36-2B policy, land use policy, to other parcels in the canyon, we will have flooding problems. And we already have flooding problems that we're dealing with in this city that are going to cost us money to fix. And I, as a council member, don't want to see that in the future, that anything that we would do now would antagonize that condition. Taking this a little further, when I read this report, and again, I'm looking at the 1986 Upper Pulgas Creek Assessment District. This imagined, there was a page in here, I just turned from it, I shouldn't have done that. On page 16 of this 86 document, it imagined 70 parcels being buildable in the Devonshire Sanitation District and the unincorporated area. And then later, a later document that was the part of the material provided for resolution number 2001-115, there's a statement in here that says it addresses this older EIR, and it says at that time 70 new homes could be built. Since that date, the drainage improvements were completed and a substantial number of new homes have been built. A recent analysis of development in unincorporated Devonshire Canyon showed that no less than 20 potential new homes could be built on vacant property in that area. Now, I point that out because the DFEIR talks about 57. So how do we get from 20 from this document to 57 in some other place? I don't know. And I wrestled through all these documents and tried to figure this out, and I quite frankly can't. So I'm asking you as staff to look at it. And again, part of my concern with that question has to do with future flooding, and also I believe the 57 was put out there as a cumulative impact worst case scenario or as an alternative project, because I think an EIR has to look at an alternative project, if I'm not mistaken. And since the argument seems to be bring these things into the city, we'll have a lesser impact. I'm not so convinced that that's true based on these numbers that I've expounded upon tonight. So those are my questions. And thank you very much.
Thank you.
If we have no other questions of council, we can close on this item. Okay, we'll close on this item and move on to, I think, public comment. Yes, if we have any other members of the public who would like to address the council on items not on the posted agenda, you can do so at this time. And I'm seeing none, so we are adjourned for the evening. Thank you.